They quarantined the systems, shut down the network to stop whatever was capping the locals. So behind each of these gates is a solar system full of whatever made the protomolecule. Miller laughed. Something in the sound of it sent a shiver down Holden's spine. That seems pretty unlikely. Why? This station has been waiting for the all-clear signal to open the network back up for about 2 billion years. If they'd found a solve, they wouldn't still be waiting. Whatever it was, I think it got them all. All of them but you, Holden said. Nah, kid, I'm one of them like the Rocinante is one of you. The Rossi's smart for a machine. It knows a lot about you. It could probably gin up a rough simulation of you if someone told it to. Those things, the ones you felt like, compared to them, I'm a fancy kind of hand terminal. In the nothing it explains, Holden said, you mean what killed them? Well, if we're going to be fair, it's not really nothing, Miller said, crossing his arms. We know it ate a galaxy-spanning hive consciousness like it was popcorn, so that's something. And we know it survived a sterilization that was a couple hundred solar systems wide. Hey guys, Pete here. It's time for part 3 of my Expanse Protomolecule series. Today I'm going to be discussing the Investigator, that fancy kind of hand terminal that also happens to appear to Holden as everyone's favorite belter detective, Josephus Miller. We'll also discuss the mysterious artifact that he discovered on Ilus, which he dubbed the Bullet. Doing that will involve some spoilers. If you've not watched the Expanse TV series through episode 1 of season 5, then there will be some things here you might be seeing for the first time. I've read the books the show's based on, and I'll be referring to those a lot, but only up to and including Nemesis games. With that out of the way, let's get started. In part 1 of this series, we talked about what the protomolecule is. Not in itself a living thing, but a set of free-floating instructions designed to adapt and guide other replicating systems. How the bit of protomolecule that got sent to Sol system got trapped in Saturn's gravity, and how that stopped it from completing its mission for over 2 billion years. We talked about how humanity discovered it, how they tried to use it for their own means, and how that made it possible for it to move forward with what it was sent to do in the first place. Build the ring gate. In part 2, we talked about what the ring gate actually is, plus the network of other gates it's attached to, and how the alien civilization that created it all no longer exists. Most of what we learned about them came from interactions James Holden had with what looked like our old friend Detective Miller. We'll come back to that in just a minute, but what I hope you took away from the first 2 videos is this. The protomolecule is a tool. The long extinct gate builder civilization used that tool to create a network of wormhole gates. Through each of these gates lies a system with at least one habitable planet, and they all connect around a hub in the non-space that's referred to as the slow zone. This isn't the only way the tool can be used, and it isn't the only tool they have in their toolbox, but it is what the load that Phoebe was carrying was for. Because it took so long for this ring gate to open and connect to the network, there was nobody there when it happened. That meant it couldn't complete the next step in its process. That's all it was designed to do. And that brings us to the subject of today's video. What does the protomolecule do when it can't report to the station that work on the ring gate is complete? It creates the Investigator. The creation is a tool for a specific purpose. To figure out why it can't complete its task. That's pretty straightforward, but because the civilization that created it was so advanced, the things it can do aren't always easy to grasp. In our story, no one understands this better than James Holden, who has his brain manipulated in a way that makes him see hallucinations of Miller. Because active protomolecule was left behind on the Rossi after the hybrid incident, it became a node on the network and a possible path to utilize to complete the task. Because Detective Miller's consciousness was absorbed into the hive mind on the way to Venus, it's able to use that to contact Holden. He first experiences this around the time that the slingshotter Mineo flew his ship the YK into the ring. In the beginning, the things he says don't make any sense and lead Holden to think he's going insane. Since he can check for that sort of thing with their auto dock, he figures out that he's not and then starts to believe he's being manipulated by the protomolecule. In a way, he's not wrong, but given the circumstances, he unsurprisingly misinterprets why that's happening. Holden has his first real conversation with the Investigator when he travels alone to the ring station. They're able to communicate in a coherent way. The investigator makes it so that he can go inside the structure because he needs his help to access what he calls the records. I discussed most of what happens here in my previous video, and this is when we learn a lot of the details about how it is that Holden has been seeing him in the first place. The important thing that happens here for the investigator is he learns that the Gatebuilder civilization is gone. He learns how that happened, and Holden sees that too. The important thing that happens for humanity is that Miller explains that if the ships in the slow zone power down their reactors, the station will no longer see them as a threat, and then he can shut down the security system. When he does that, it will also reopen the network, giving them access to all of the rings, and therefore all 1,300 systems that lie beyond them. He takes Holden to one of the planets, one that is very similar to Earth in a vision/hallucination. And there he explains what he's actually made to do. That goes like this. I wasn't built to fix shit humanity broke, Miller said. I didn't come here to open gates for you and get the lockdown to let you go. That's incidental. The thing that made me just builds roads. And now it's using me to find out what happened to the galaxy-spanning civilization that wanted the road. Why does that matter if they're all gone? It doesn't, Miller said with a weary shrug. Not a bit. If you set the nav computer on the Rossi to take you somewhere and then fall over dead a second later, can the Rossi decide it doesn't matter anymore and just not go? No, Holden said, understanding and finding a sadness for this Miller construct he wouldn't have guessed was possible. We were supposed to connect with the network. We're just trying to do that. Doesn't matter that the network's gone. What came up off of Venus is dumb, kid. Just knows how to do one thing. It doesn't know how to investigate, but I do, and it had me. So I'm going to investigate even though none of the answers will mean fuck all to the universe at large. That's their last interaction in the third book and the third season of the show, and at the end of that, he hints that he'll still need Holden's help to continue. He tells him that he'll need a ride. So to recap, the real Detective Miller died on the way to Venus with his consciousness being absorbed into the ring building project. When the ring gate was finished, it tried to complete the next step, which was to connect to the network at the ring station. Not able to do that, it eventually created the investigator as a tool to figure out what was wrong. In that process, it used the protomolecule on the Rossi to reach out and manipulate Holden's brain, making him see and interact with a construct based on Miller. This displays aspects of Miller's personality. Those are artifacts that are built into it, and it does help humanity get out of the situation in the slow zone, but it only exists for the purpose of investigating. Initially, Wyatt wasn't able to connect to the ring station network, and then later, what happened to the civilization that built it? As far as Wyatt contacted Holden in the first place, he asked this question to the investigator directly inside the station before he touches the big thing in the middle of the room. I get why no one else sees you, but the real question is why me at all? I mean, okay, you're screwing with my brain and that's hard work, and if there's other people for me to interact with, it's too hard and all like that, but why me? Why not Naomi? Or the UN Secretary General or something? Miller nodded, understanding the question. He frowned, sighed. Miller kinda liked you, thought you were a decent guy. That's it? You need more? Book 4, Cibola Burn, is where we learn a lot more about how the investigator functions because it includes several interludes which are basically chapters from its point of view. They read like a stream of consciousness, and the first one starts like this. It reaches out, it reaches out, it reaches out, it reaches out. 113 times a second, nothing answers and it reaches out. It is not conscious, though parts of it are. There are structures within it that were once separate organisms, aboriginal, evolved, and complex. It is designed to improvise, to use what is there and then move on. Good enough is good enough, and so the artifacts are ignored or adapted. The conscious parts try to make sense of the reaching out, try to interpret it. We learn some new things from these interludes and get some clarification about what's happening. Early on, when the investigator would reappear, it didn't have a memory of talking to Holden before. This is because it was essentially killed and recreated over and over again. It uses Miller's consciousness, creates the investigator, and lets it investigate on its own with some limiting boundary conditions. The Rossi and the crew go to Ilus, which has a lot of protomolecule-built artifacts on the planet itself, and this opens a new pathway for the investigator to look for clues as to what happened to the Gatebuilder civilization. Because there's active protomolecule on the Rossi, things get turned on, The investigator is able to access the network there to look around, and eventually it discovers a place where the protomolecule can't go. This is a clue, and so it focuses on trying to understand what it is. The interlude says this: "And instead there's a dead place, a place where nothing is, where nothing pulls back. The investigator reaches out, and what reaches out dies. The investigator ceases to reach out, it waits, it considers. Something was here once, something built all this, and left its meal half-eaten on the table. The designers and engineers that spanned 1,000 worlds had lived here and died here, and left behind the everyday wonders like bones in the desert. The investigator knows this. The world is a crime scene, and the one thing that stands out, the one thing that doesn't belong, is the place that nothing goes. It's an artifact in a world of artifacts, but it doesn't fit. What would they put in a place they couldn't reach? Is it a prison? A treasure chest? A question that isn't supposed to be asked. A bullet? A bomb still ticking under the kitchen table after the blitz was over." The investigator talks Holden into going to where the bullet is. Mercury interrupts as he doesn't want the protomolecule tech shut down, even though everyone is probably going to die. And so Holden has to stop and deal with that. He asks Elvi Okoye to help the investigator, who has now figured out how to put himself into something physical. It's a protomolecule tech robot, basically. After being created and destroyed over and over, knowing that there's no way to connect back to the gate builders because they're gone, the investigator begins to see the bullet as his way out. This is partially due to the influence of Miller's consciousness, and the show illustrated this by having him start to appear without the hat towards the end of season 4. The thing that created it only knows how to survive and to reach out and to try to make the final connection. It can create the investigator, it can kill the investigator, and in that process, the investigator learns how to die. That is the plan. With Elvi's help, the investigator plans to pass through the bullet after it connects to everything on Ilus. It needs Elvi because after it connects, the protomolecule will try to stop it. She's able to get him there, and the bullet kills him and everything he's connected to. In the final interlude, it plays out like this. The investigator pushes his hat back, wishes he had a beer. He likes this woman, this Elvi. He wishes he had a little more time to know her. He wishes he had a little more time. He doesn't care. He has died 1,000,000 times since he died. The void has no mysteries for him now. He connects, and the investigator becomes the world. He feels it everywhere. The orbital bases, the power cores in the crushing depth of the ocean, the library vaults where the old ones had lived, the signaling stations high in the mountains, the cities deep beneath the ground. He is the world. There is a struggle at the end. There's always a struggle at the end. He's not scared. And so all through the world, the others aren't either. You're like Peter Pan, she says. When a child died, Peter Pan would fall halfway with them, so they wouldn't be scared. Weird. And that's a kid's story? Anyway, it's not me, the investigator says, smiles at her, holds her hand. I don't go for half. It reaches out, and it reaches out, and it reaches out, and then it stops. So that is the end for this version of Miller and the activated protomolecule tech on Ilus. It's not exactly clear what that means in the big picture of what the gate builders left behind. The investigator did connect to the network at the Ringgate station when he was there, which means his consciousness probably still exists. There's still more active protomolecule out there, and now more than 1,300 new worlds that could be filled with artifacts just like Ilus. For the bullet, it seems to be a weapon that was specifically designed to kill the gate builders. Elvi had an interesting experience when she passed through it, but it didn't kill her. In the beginning of Season 5, we learned that she stayed on Ilus to study it, and that she created a simulation of what she saw when she passed through it, but she doesn't have a clear explanation of what it is or what's going on with it. When Holden and Fred Johnson look at the sim, he explains that it's a visualization of what killed the builders, wiping out their civilization in an instant. Since no more of these have appeared on any of the other colony worlds they visited, Fred's skeptical about whether this is something they need to be concerned with. Holden tells him that every time he passes through a ring, he thinks he sees their world, the unknown aggressor's world, and every time he sees them, he thinks they look angrier. He worries that humans are waking them up, and that's probably not something that humans want to do. In the end, the gate builders were far more advanced than humans, and whatever created this bullet was powerful enough to erase them from existence. They were galaxy spanning. They were able to harness wormhole technology for faster than light travel and built this elaborate network that connected all of these habitable systems together. We know that humans will use the ring gates that they built to colonize the new worlds. That's already happening. And so we have to wonder how the builders put themselves on the unknown aggressor's radar in the first place. And that seems like a good place to bring this video to an end. Rip to the investigator, rip to the original Detective Miller. He was a great character, and who knows, he may come back at some point in the future, although I think his story's complete. In his service to the Protomolecule, which is just trying to complete its task, we learned a lot about the gate builders, and that there is a threat that's bigger than them that could play an important role in the story in the future. And I will leave it there. Please let me know in the comments what you think about the investigator. If you have any questions about it, if you have any questions about the Protomolecule in general, if you're going to discuss things that happen in books past Nemesis games, please mark those as book spoilers so people who are just watching the show won't get spoiled for future events. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.